some of the money of the depositors is kept behind the great door of this vault. Part of the money that comes into a bank is kept in cash, but the rest of it must be put to work to earn a profit for the bank. And so, the bank invests much of its money. The bank also invests its customers' money in personal and business loans to reliable people.
All right, good morning. I feel like I'm among old friends at this stage. I've done a few of these. So, is everyone talking about the football? Yeah. Are they going to win a national championship? Yes. All right, good confidence.
Let's not say it out loud. We'll just hope.
All right. Well, let's get started. As you know, from those who I've had the chance to meet before, I'm Andre Dua. I'm the managing partner of McKinsey in Miami, and we're pleased to host this speaker series together with the University of Miami Herbert Business School. We really think it's a great opportunity to highlight distinctive leaders in Florida. Florida has one of the most vibrant economies in the world. I think it's easy to sometimes forget that if we were a country, it would be the 15th largest economy in the world, only slightly smaller than Mexico and Spain's economy. So there's a lot of dynamism here and a lot of terrific leaders. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to highlight that. I'm going to now turn it over to Jason Dam, who's Assistant Professor of Professional Practice in Finance here at the school, and he's going to introduce today's guest speaker.
Thanks, Andre. And good morning, everyone. On behalf of the University of Miami's Herbert Business School and Dean Pavlo, I just want to thank you all for being here. We are very excited about our continued partnership with McKinsey and everything that comes with these speaker series. They are always a highlight of our semester. Now I'm honored to introduce Jorge Gonzalez, CEO and Vice Chairman of City National Bank. George is a native of Miami. He is deeply committed to the community here, our education, health, and culture. And he has been recognized as the ultimate CEO by the South Florida Business Journal and Corporate Citizen of the Year by the Miami Beach Chamber of Commerce. George serves on the boards of Nicklaus Children's Hospital, FIU CasaCuba, and the Institute of Contemporary Art, among others. He has over 35 years of banking experience, holds a degree in finance and international business from FIU, hold your booze, and is a graduate of the Keenan Flagler Business School Executive Leadership Program at UNC. So please join me in welcoming Jorge Gonzalez.
All right, one of the things that's exciting to me about this is I happen to know George really well, so he'll have to tell.
Be kind.
He'll have to tell the truth. So George, I think one of the things that people tend to find really interesting in these is just hearing a little bit about people's career journeys. You've had an exceptional 35-year career. I enjoy saying it's 35 since mine's only about 25. But you've had an exceptional career, and I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about that, including at some point your decision in 2009 to move to City National Bank of Florida. But maybe tell us a little bit, how did your career unfold? How did you get here? And what were some of the pivotal choices you made in that journey?
Well, first of all, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I'm really honored to answer some questions. So, listen, I am native. I am a native Miamian. I've been here for almost 60 years, born and raised in Miami, and haven't really strayed too far from the city. I love the city of Miami. I love everything about it, and I think we're all fortunate to call this home. As far as my career, I never really intended to be in banking. That was more of a coincidence than anything else. I had this idea that I was going to be an attorney, and we were talking earlier that my junior year at FIU, I was a finance and international business major, and my finance professor talked me into an internship for a German bank on Brickell. And I said, I don't want to do an internship. I'm going to be an attorney. I don't really need to go work in the bank. And he said, just go work in the bank, and it'll help you. what I quickly realized was that I really didn't know what it meant to be an attorney, because I got to work with attorneys during the internship, and I realized that what they did was nothing close to what I wanted to do. But I didn't know that because I had never been exposed to other than the concept of being an attorney, in terms of what you see on TV or what you read about. And number two, I didn't really know what it meant to be a banker. So those things kind of, I was exposed to two careers, one of which I started to like, one of which I started to not like, and it really changed my trajectory. So I decided after I graduated I was going to go work in a management training program for Southeast Bank, which back then had one of the better training programs in town. And I was going to do that for 18 months, and then I was going to go to law school after that. Well, 35 years later, here I am in banking. And I really, as I think back about my career, there's a couple things that I really attribute 3 decades of banking to. Number one was that moment. Number two, I hit banking at the right time. In other words, banking for a long time had been a very slow-moving career. Bankers were very comfortable spending 20, 30, 40 years in a job, but the job was not fast-paced. But back in 1988, 89, 90, deregulation started to hit banking. So the career path, the industry really started to open up, and they needed people with different DNA, different skill sets, different perspective on business. So timing was an important element of that. I think the other thing that was super important is I was very fortunate to always have good mentors. I always chose my jobs, not just by the job itself or the institution, but by who I was going to be working with. And I look back and I look at what we do today in terms of City National, and I think having the right mentors in life is absolutely mission critical to success. Surrounding yourself with really good people who care about you, who want to see you succeed, who are willing to put forth time and effort into your career path is a game changer. So when I'm trying to help provide feedback to our younger employees, I always try to make sure that they're lined up with people that have common personalities and people who want to help younger folks, because I think it made such a big difference in my life and my career, and I think it's a catalyst for success. And I think the other thing too is when I look at the last 35 years, it's never, nobody's life is, perfect, right? You got ups and downs. And whether it's by luck or just by persistence, every time there was a down moment, it turned out to be a silver lining. But in the moment, I didn't know that. I thought it was the end of the world. There was something negative that had happened. But when I was in that situation, I always tried to make the best of it and turn it into a positive moment. And as I look back, there was 3 or 4 pivotal things that happened that were negative in the moment, but when I look back, they were actually positive. But you didn't know that in the situation. So those are some things that I can really think about that were game changers in the last 35 years. And but surrounding yourself with the right people who care, who you aspire to be like for some reason or another, I think are really important attributes to people's philosophy and how they navigate a career.
So just one follow-up. What were the major institutions along the way before you joined City National?
So I really haven't worked for many organizations. I worked for one institution that had 4 different names: Southeast, First Union, Wachovia, Wells Fargo. It was all the same bank.
Just got bigger.
But it just got bigger, and they kept acquiring each other. So that was really one. I worked for a private equity firm in Texas called Creekwood Capital. And then in 2008, after spending 23, 24 years in a large bank environment, I had kind of had enough of it, and I was ready for a change. And I realized at the moment that the large banks were really good at some things and not so good at others. And what they weren't good at was providing, relationship banking to their clients, providing a high level of service to their clients, providing access to people that can make a decision to their clients. And I felt that there was a huge gap, a vacuum in the marketplace that needed to be filled by an institution that has scale, size, and talent, but also had the opportunity and the business model to be able to deliver that in a small bank way, in a much more intimate way, in a much more, in a much more frictionless way. So I decided to join City National in January of 2009. My timing wasn't great, if you guys remember what happened in 2009. It was a very difficult time in banking. But therein lies opportunity as well. I remember the first 6 or 12 months of me making that jump. I was like, man, what did I do? I left this, very senior job at a large organization, felt fairly protected and insulated from, the crisis, to jump onto a $2 billion bank that was navigating, a difficult real estate environment here in South Florida. And it wasn't easy. But we made the best of it. Today we're $26 billion, so we've gone from $2 billion to $26 billion. The majority of that growth has been organic. We've made 2 acquisitions that only represented about $3 billion. So, out of $24 billion of growth, $3 billion has been through M&A. The rest of it has been one client at a time and one banker at a time, kind of the old-fashioned way. But it's been super rewarding. We've built something that has scale, it has talent, it has technology. But the most important thing it has a business model that's been really well received by our clients. We're not a mass retail bank. We're not a B of A or Wells Fargo. We're more of a private commercial bank. But the client experience that we deliver is truly what differentiates us from the marketplace. It's truly what sets us apart, because banking, for the most part, is a commodity, right? Our products, I tell people our money is not any greener. It's the same color. I wish it was different. It's not. Our products are pretty much the same. Our technology is, for the most part, the same. The only thing that really sets us apart is our people and the experience that we provide for our clients. So when you interact with the institution, if you don't feel different than with us than when you feel with another large institution, then we're just a commodity, and it's hard to compete in a commoditized industry when you're dealing with, multi-trillion-dollar institutions. So we've got a niche, we've got a value proposition that's been well received, and we're just, we continue to execute our plan, and it continues to be well received.
That's great. Yeah, so you've got this special experience. So recently, right, CNB became the official bank of the University of Miami. And I saw a picture of you, clap. And I saw a picture of you with Sebastian holding up the U, so we love that. So you mentioned this shared history of both institutions in your interview about the partnership. And I know that CNB has this connection to South Florida as University of Miami does. And it's almost like we've grown up together, the two institutions. So specifically, what initiatives do you foresee for this partnership? And how's it going to benefit, say, our students, our faculty, and the alumni here? And then, how does it strengthen CNB's, connection with the community?
Well, first of all, it only took us 80 years to do that.
So. What took you so long?
Yeah, what took us so long. Listen, these are 2 institutions that have been the pillars of this community for a long time. UM will be 100 years next year. Yep. City National is approaching, almost 80 years. So this was bound to happen. In other words, it was just a matter of time before these 2 institutions decided to work together, because we share, right, a common marketplace. We share a common goal to make this community better every day. We share so many alumni, so many board members, so many clients. I mean, there's so much overlap between these 2 institutions that really, it's actually a little depressing it took this long to make it happen. I was waiting for a winning season, and Mario, Coach Mario said, "Listen, this is going to be it." So I kind of went all in right before, being 7-0 or 8-7-0, 8-0, 8-0.
No, yeah.
But so what are the opportunities? I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to help students, faculty, staff, alumni, you name it, with custom tailored products that will be beneficial relative to the partnership. In other words, we can do things for the constituents that we can't do for others just because of the scale of these two organizations coming together. So we're in the process of pulling that together so that we can figure out a way to help the University of Miami help people that are important to them. And that's ultimately what we want to do. Anytime we have a partnership with an organization, our goal is to help them succeed. Because if they succeed, then the partnership is deemed to be a success. And so everything we're doing is to make sure that the U is, they can leverage our partnership to take care of whomever is important to them, which is obviously the people in this room, students, a lot of alumni throughout the country, really, not just here.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what we want to do. I think it's an opportunity for us to mutually increase our visibility, and just continue to create more brand awareness for the two institutions. And that's probably it. I mean, so there's a lot to be done. This is a 5-year agreement. So we're month 3, right? A lot of it's in the process of being designed, but we just want to be helpful. We want to be helpful. We want to help organizations and institutions that are absolutely mission critical to the success of South Florida and the state of Florida. And the University of Miami is by far, one of those institutions. So if we help drive the U's success, we're really helping the marketplace, which eventually helps us. So it's a vicious circle, right? It's a very intertwined circle that we always, and we've always been about giving back to this community. The Abbott's family who started City National, who've been so important to the University of Miami, that's always been one of their core values, one of the true, pillars of what they focused on. And I've tried to carry that legacy through my career at City. And it's about giving back to the community, right? We have a responsibility to give back, and we have the good fortune of being able to give back. So every time we have an opportunity to do so, particularly as it relates to either education, healthcare, or arts and culture, which are our 3 pillars of being able to reinvest, that's what we do.
So, George, one of the things you said earlier was you joined in 2009, which was obviously there was a little bit of a financial crisis. It feels like actually there's so much going on in the world that we've almost forgotten last year's crisis, which was the Silicon Valley Bank and the other regional banks. And I think one of the things that did is it created a lot of tailwinds for the big institutions. JP Morgan and others really hoovered up deposits at that time, right? Because people were concerned about the safety of their money. So, as you said, City National is a lot smaller bank. So, firstly, can you tell us a little bit what it was like to go through that crisis last year and how did you manage it? But second, what's been the implication of that as you think about what do you have to do to win in this marketplace? Because suddenly, to many consumers, it seems advantageous to go to a big bank, right? So how do you continue to differentiate yourself? So maybe start by talking a little bit about how you dealt with the crisis and then how you're responding to it.
So, funny thing about the crisis, if you had asked most investment banks or most consulting firms back in, maybe 3-6 months before the last year's banking crisis, who were the 3 banks that you should try to be more like?
Silicon Valley, First Republic.
Signature Bank, right? So the folks that were seasoned experts in the industry had identified those 3 institutions as some of the best performing, more innovative, better structured financial institutions in the country. And they failed. So what does that tell you? I'm not sure, but other than, be careful where you get advice from. And it's funny, we have never tried to be like one organization. We've always tried to take the approach that we look at, what each other institutions do well in channels of business, and we've tried to kind of take pieces and parts of that and build what we're building here. Mm-hmm. What's the most important lesson of last year's crisis is that diversification continues to be absolutely mission critical to the success of any financial services firm. You just have to be diversified because you never know where you're going to get surprised. You never know where you're going to have a problem. So if you're heavily concentrated in one area or another, and you happen to be hit in that area, you have a problem, okay? That's the first lesson. The second lesson is, banks don't fail because of a lack of capital. Banks fail because of a lack of liquidity, right? They run out of liquidity because everybody decides to take their cash out at once. Now, 50 years ago, that used to take 6 months because you'd have to stand in line in a branch to wait to pull your money out. These days, with these things, the money leaves in a very short period of time. I think Silicon Valley lost like $48 billion in like 3 days. And nobody went to the branch to take that money out. They just basically wired it out. So it's much more dangerous these days because things move very quickly. And whether it's gossip, or fact, people react first and then ask questions later. So you have to make sure, number one, that you're well diversified. You have to make sure that the confidence of safety and soundness is well articulated, first of all, to your people, and then to your clients. Because your people are that first line of defense, or that first level of being able to communicate that to your clients, particularly in our business. So, how did we navigate that? Listen, we have always decided to be very proactive during the crisis. And we're fortunate that at our size, it's a lot easier to do so, right? Because we have, let's call it 60, 70,000 clients. We have 1,000 employees. So what we did that weekend is we spent all weekend reaching out to clients. And we called them up and said, we want you to know. Well, first of all, they said, why are you calling? Right? So there's a danger in that, right? If you don't typically call somebody and then you call them, they're like, wait a second, there's a problem here. So we had to deal with that. But we proactively called, thousands of clients and said, we want you to know, here are the fundamental, metrics to our institution. Everything's good. There's a lot of noise in the industry. If you're worried about something, let us know. And so we were super proactive about it. We didn't want there to be any misinterpretation because the media was blowing things. It was a crisis, but there was also a lot of misinformation that was being distributed. So we wanted to make sure that our story was being well received by our clients. And if anybody had questions, particularly our larger clients, they could speak to me, they could speak to our CFO, they could speak to people who really understood what was going on and could talk from a position of knowledge. So that was a lesson, and we did the same thing. We did the same thing during the pandemic. We've always been, the culture of the organization has been one of being super transparent and super proactive when there's a problem.
Yep.
I tend to think we maybe perform a little bit better because we come together and really kind of navigate the situation and never waste a good crisis. So long story short, diversification, really important learning, being proactive, being prepared ahead of time, because if you have to prepare in the middle of a crisis, you got a problem. So being prepared to be able to handle these situations ahead of time is really, really key. And running a good organization. I mean, listen, what happened, some of those were really good organizations that just got caught at the wrong time with the wrong shift in momentum that they couldn't deal with in a very quick way.
Yep.
And others had some real issues in their business model, which created some bad outcomes.
So I had a follow-up question there. This is a leadership event, and you're mentioning, being proactive during times of crisis. So I was wondering, what does it look like to be a leader during those times? Do you bring everyone together? Do you have kind of develop a message to send out to clients and be proactive? How does that look from your standpoint?
Listen, I think leadership is even more important during a time of crisis in terms of the more visibility, the better, right? When there's chaos, where there's volatility, when there's a lot of negativity, people are looking for, hey, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? And how are we going to do it, right? They need direction. They need somebody to kind of own the situation and then communicate. So I think when there's volatility, the more visible you can be as a leader, the better. And sometimes leaders, because they don't know what to say or they're not prepared, they have a tendency to wait. And to me, that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
So we always try, and not just me, right? It's my executive team, anybody in the leadership role. What we try to do is we bring leadership together right away, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a financial crisis, I mean, you name it. And again, this is one of the benefits of being nimble at our size, right? I mean, we're still a top 100 bank in the country, so we're a fairly large institution, but we're not 200,000 employees. So we can really kind of shape our actions to a situation in a very intimate way, where people feel like we're in it. And I think the other thing is leading by example, right? When there's a crisis, I mean, we're in it. If we're telling people to call clients, I'm calling clients. If we're telling people to do something, we're doing the same. Because people want to see you in the trenches. They want to see you, right by their side, saying, "Hey, I'm going to go home. You bail us out of this. I'll be back next week." That's not who we are. That's not our culture. That's not the organization. That's not the way I've been mentored. And that's kind of what's worked,
That's excellent, yeah.
So you mentioned this kind of journey from 3 billion to 24 billion. And now you're looking ahead to the next vector of growth, I guess. I want to ask you about a particular thing you did last week, which is you made an announcement that you were going to hire 200 bankers, and you sort of indicated Orlando, Palm Beach, Tampa. Can you tell us a little bit about just actually the dynamics of that announcement? Because let me tell you how I read it. I read it as you're the new coach and you're declaring you're going to win. So by putting that out there and saying you're going to hire 200 bankers, you're basically forcing yourself to do it. Because another leadership approach would be to just slowly go and start doing that and have it happen. But is there some special thought process about why you decided to do it publicly and to declare your intention? Can you say a bit more about that? I was very curious.
I'll be 100% honest with you. I was being interviewed by the South Florida Business Journal.
Yeah.
And I got caught up in the moment. And it wasn't really the intent. But after reading the article, I'm glad I did it.
It looked good.
It looked real. I was like, yeah, that's
like
exactly what I wanted to do. But the reporter and I just gelled, and she got me going. And the next thing you know, I'm announcing our strategy to the entire marketplace. So we'll see how that plays out. But listen, in hindsight, I'm glad I did it because two things. I think leadership's responsibility, it's about setting vision and helping people succeed. I mean, to me, those are the two most important elements of leadership, right? You got to set the vision. Where are we going? Why are we going there? How are we going to get there? And then our job in leadership is to help our folks succeed, right? That's it. The rest of it, is important, but not as important as that. So I think when we've been doing these town halls, in the organization, where we have 50 to 100 people in the room, and we're always talking about where we're going. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Right? People want to know why. Why are you asking me to do X, Y, or Z? And so we've been talking about that internally. But I wanted our employees to see that this is not just an internal message, that this is a commitment to the marketplace that was beyond our family. And I think that reinforces, because a lot of times leaders say things that they're supposed to, but it's an internal message. And this is, we went out to the world and said, listen, this is where we're going and this is how we're going to get there. So I think that was important for our people to believe that. I think I also wanted our clients to realize that we're growing.
Yeah.
And we are successful. We're going to continue to reinvest that success in more growth. Plus, it's also a recruiting message, right? It's also, I want students, I want competitors' talent to read the article about our success and where we're going, and I want them to be part of it. So what better free marketing than to talk about, to talk about where we're going and what we're going to need to get there. And if people want to be part of a successful organization with a long history of taking care of its people and taking care of its client, then we're the show in town. So I think, did I get caught up in the moment? Absolutely. Was I lucky? Yes, I was, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I don't mean to toot your horn here, but you not only specified 200 employees, you said within 2 years, right? So that's 20% growth in your workforce. And I think we're going to hold you to that. So.
No problem, no problem.
But it's interesting we're talking about, hiring more employees in, this is going to be a little bit of a tougher question, but in an age where, since COVID specifically, right, the banking industry is kind of moving to a more digital format. We have digital-only banks, right, that are going to operate completely digitally. And there's just less emphasis, I think, in the banking industry now on in-person banking and bank branches. And we've seen some of the larger banks start to shrink their footprint, right, to cut overhead costs. But then they also lose touch with the customers. So I was wondering if you could talk about, how do you think the banking industry is going to evolve going forward? And then, how has CNB kind of adapted to that change as well?
It is a tougher question. Listen, and it depends what part of banking you're in, okay? As I said earlier, we're not a mass retail bank, right? So we're a private commercial bank. And the segments of business that we focus on are basically small, middle, large companies, real estate, and private banking, right? Those are really kind of the 4 sectors of clientele that we serve. And the more we survey those clients, what we hear from them is that the people they interact with is still very important, because these are bigger decisions, and they want that level of connectivity. Now, they also want data, digital, and technology, right? So they want best of both worlds. And our belief, why we need 200 people, is because our strategy is really about leading with people, but giving them technology to allow them to be more effective, more proactive, to be able to bring values and ideas and solutions to our clients, right? So we want to make sure, because the one thing we can't create for our people is more time, but we can make them more effective with the use of technology and data, and to provide a better client experience. So those are the things that we're focused on, is that we want to have great talent, and we want to make sure that the institution is supporting that personnel with the tools that they need to be successful. Remember, our leadership's job is to help our people be successful. And how do we do so is we got to give them, in today's day and age, data, right? Data allows you to be smarter about how you use your time, and trying to find proactive solutions to bring to your clients. If we're waiting for that phone to ring, we've, again, commoditized our business. Anybody can wait for the phone to ring. But if we're showing up at a business owner's business with ideas that can help them be more effective, be more efficient, gain an edge on their competition, because our people are more informed and better versed, then that's people are willing to pay a premium for that. If we're just waiting for the phone to ring to have a service problem, not much to be said about that. So the industry is going to change, but the niche of business, the niche of our space within the financial services industry, we believe are still going to put a huge premium on talented folks. Now, you still have to have the technology to be able to provide an experience that is as cost effective and as efficient as possible. If we were going to go play against some of the larger institutions in the retail business or on the digital banking business, I may have a different answer. I would definitely do it, but then you need so much scale to be able to be competitive, because these institutions are investing hundreds of billions of dollars into technology, and it's just a different game.
So you mentioned earlier, George, that you have, about 1,000 people right now. I'd like to hear a little bit more about what's your philosophy when you try and lead 1,000 people? Because in a way, 1,000 people is, it's not so small that you can know everyone, but it's not so big you can't reach everyone personally in some way, right? So I'm curious a little bit about your philosophy there. And then also, as you develop your workforce, what are you looking for? Like, what are the attributes that you've instructed your team to focus on that you think are going to give you an edge in the future?
So I'm not sure if I lead 1,000 people or they lead me. It depends what day of the week it is. But one of the things we talk about is we have to use size to our advantage. And what I mean by that is, since we are smaller, that only is an asset if you actually use it in a proactive way. So, you know, when there's an opportunity to send an email, but you can have a face-to-face conversation, have the face-to-face conversation. When you can have a meeting via video versus in person, have the in-person conversation. We rolled our strategic plan, our 5 years, we rolled out our strategic plan for the next 5 years, and we did it, I had to have, I don't know, probably 6, 7, 8 meetings in person. It's hard work, right? But I decided that I could have done it, I could have filmed it, I could have played it, and that would have taken, you know, 90 minutes or 60 minutes, and it would have been done. But we decided, and we decided as a team that if we're going to use our size to our advantage, people want this. People want to be able to sit in the room and and listen to where we're going. But the most important part people want is the Q&A. They want to be able to ask questions about, why are we doing this? Have you thought about that? What do you think about this? And since we've built that, that's part of our culture. They know they're going to get a direct answer. They may not like my answer, but they're going to get a direct answer. They appreciate that. They like the intimacy, because they can go work for a much larger institution, and the reason they're there, the reason our employees are with us, is they want to be part of a smaller, more, just a smaller environment. Otherwise, they can work anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I got to give them what they want. Right. They're there for a reason. I got to consistently give them back what they want. And so every time we have an opportunity to go above and beyond and deliver something in a much more human way, we're doing so. What was the second part of your question?
Well, what kind of attributes are you looking for, right, in employees?
So, first of all, from a leadership standpoint, I often believe that leadership doesn't spend enough time on the most important part of their job, which is people, because that's the difficult part of the job. And what I mean by that is, you know, leadership. When a leader sees what their given day looks like, they have very tactical responsibilities, and then they also have responsibilities when it relates to human capital. The tactical responsibilities, in all honesty, are pretty easy, right? Because that's why they're in leadership, because they've conquered those. The human capital part of the job is hard, because you're dealing with personalities, emotions, different levels of career. But that's ultimately the real driver to success, is helping people operate at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And when I think about time management from a leadership standpoint, and where leaders spend their time, I've always realized that they spend 80, 90% of their time tactically, and not enough time in helping people get better and succeed. Because it's hard. People don't like to change. People don't want to do things outside of their comfort zone. So from a leadership standpoint, we try to hire leaders or promote leaders that really understand that their primary responsibility is to help people develop and be successful. And then somebody said to me, you know, how do you make people smile? Well, you hire people to smile, right? Right? So you hire people to smile. It's really hard to hire somebody that doesn't smile and make them smile, right? So it starts with hiring the right people, right? You got to have the right skill sets so when you interview people, we always interview people under two facets of execution. Number one, their skill sets, right? And that's kind of what gets them in the door. Mm-hmm. But the second thing we do is, are they going to be a good fit for the organization? Are they going to be part of our culture, part of our family? And a lot of times, leaders, when there's a job they have to fill, they're in a hurry to fill that job. So they look at the resume and they'll say, wait a second, yeah, that person checks every box. But are they going to be a good fit? Because there's a lot of players, there's a lot of employees that fit the skill set box, but may not be a good fit for the team or the organization, and therefore are not nearly as effective as it could be. It could actually become toxic to what we're trying to accomplish. So when we interview people, we really want to make sure that they have the skill sets, but they're also going to be a good fit. And it's hard work, because you got to take them out of the work environment. You got to talk to them. You got to get to know who they are, and then you hire them. And listen, we're not perfect. If you're really good at hiring people, you maybe bat 65%, right? Because it's more of an art than a science. So we try to hire right, and then we make sure that leadership's focused on making those people successful. And we do the best we can.
Very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. So CNB is based in Miami, right? And since inception, you've grown up here as a business. You've grown within the community, and now you're the second largest bank in Florida, $26 billion in assets. Now, I first moved to Miami in 2006, and the growth in this area has been spectacular, and I think none more so than the finance industry. I mean, now we have students that used to go straight to New York for jobs in finance. Now they're all looking to stay down here. They want to be local. There's opportunities for them locally. So I was wondering if you could talk about and give us your perspective on the development of the finance industry, specifically within South Florida, and how CNB has kind of grown with that and is connected to the community.
Listen, I've been here a long time, and I've seen every cycle, every phase of Miami's growth over the last 60 years. And Andre and I talk about this, and he just got here basically, so we're still qualifying him as a citizen. He hasn't necessarily met all the requirements yet. But I am super excited. I think the next 10 years of Miami are going to dwarf the last 20. I think there's so many things. People tend to think that this all happened post-COVID, and people forget that the momentum and the inertia of the city of Miami pre-COVID was already going in that direction. Yeah, COVID did, the pandemic did accelerate it, but it wasn't but the foundation was already there for that to happen, right? So the global visibility of this marketplace is just phenomenal. No matter where you go in the world, people want to talk about South Florida. I was talking to somebody that was, I won't tell you who it is, but somebody had a very important political job in a different country. And when they got there, they said that there was 100, 200 people that wanted to meet with him. And there was, it took him 6 months. And he thought that everybody wanted to talk about, trade between the two countries, wanted to talk about, regulation, wanted to talk about politics, and they wanted to talk about Miami because he was from Miami. That was and how to do business in Miami. Yeah. So these are people from all over Europe that were really interested in how to do business in Miami. They didn't really care about the more global geopolitical part of his job. So Miami is at that place. I mean, relative to, cultural, healthcare, it's no longer just a place for tourism. People really want to be here. And the amount of domestic capital that we have seen flow to this marketplace is amazing. Because for the most part, it used to be Latin American capital that flew in and then got pulled out. Flew in, got pulled out. And now what you've seen is actually the Latin American capital has been dwarfed by how much money has been coming in domestically. And it's not transient money. It's money that wants to be here and has a much longer term view. So I think now it doesn't mean, I think the boom bust cycle of Florida and South Florida is a thing of the past. We're still going to have cycles, right? We're still going to have things that go bump in the night. But I don't think it's going to be as volatile as what we've seen over the last 30, 40, 50 years, just because the foundation of this economy is vastly different than it ever has been, and we're on everybody's radar. As far as the financial industry, what we're seeing is a lot of private equity money, a lot of hedge fund money, money and people moving to South Florida. And our job is to make sure they stay here, right? Our job is to make sure they stay here because it's redefining the economic infrastructure of this city. And we need that to be able to continue to build our future and the growth trajectory of our community. But we've seen so much investment from very astute investors with little leverage. That's another thing that's always been a very important kind of a weak point for this economy is there's always been a lot of leverage. And what we're seeing these days is just a lot of capital, a lot of equity that's going into the economy and the marketplace and transactions, which just gives you a more safe and sound infrastructure to be able to build on. So I think between, as far as the global visibility, the industries that are doubling and tripling down in terms of healthcare, technology, financial services, it's just redefining the entire economic landscape of South Florida. And I feel good about the future. Now, there's some things we have to work on. We know that, right? We have to work on, affordability. We have to work on transportation. We have to work on education. But any city in the country, in all honesty, that has experienced the growth and the success that we have probably have to work on the same things, right? We're not unique. This is not a problem specific to South Florida. These are issues and challenges that come as a byproduct of success. And you just have to navigate them, and we have to work collectively as a community to make that happen. And I think we have, good leadership, and we have people who have been here a long time, and we have new people who have arrived to this community who want to see this community continue to succeed. So we have to work together along with the public sector to make that happen. And I think we're pushing in the right direction.
We could ask a lot more questions, but I want to make sure we have a chance for people in the audience. So does anyone have a question that they'd like to ask George? Maybe we start
we have
over
some
here. We're bringing a
microphones, right?
microphone.
Yeah, we've got a microphone.
And maybe if you could just introduce yourself, your name, and then ask your question.
Should I stand up? Or?
Sure. If you want to be on camera.
Good morning, Mr. Gonzalez. So the question I have for you today is, earlier in the talk you mentioned that when you were looking for a job early in your career, you also looked for potential mentors at the companies. So that being said, what qualities did you look for in those mentors, and what are some potential pitfalls while searching for a mentor that you've experienced?
So I think there's two ways to look at mentorship. And I always tell employees, particularly young employees, you have to take responsibility for your own success and your own careers. So you can't wait for things to happen. In other words, you can be assigned a mentor, which is fine, but you also have to pick out your mentor. And you have to make sure that mentor wants to mentor you. So I've always been of the opinion that I want to try to control my success. I don't want somebody to try to control that for me. So even if an organization has a mentorship program, I would take advantage of that, but I would not leave it. I would not let that be the only catalyst for how you decide who your mentor is. And what I always looked for was somebody that had, first of all, somebody who was successful, right? But successful in how you define success, right? Because success is defined in so many different ways. Number two, somebody who had the time or the personality to want to devote, because having a mentor sounds like a great idea, but that takes time. And it takes a willingness to want to do so. So not everybody wants to do so. Somebody that had similar personality, right? I think DNA, people that want to go to dinner with you, want to spend time with you outside the office and get to know you as a person, I think that's critically important. And then you got to work, like any other relationship, you got to work at it. And I wouldn't, and a lot of times mentors are very busy. So you have to figure out a way to make them want to mentor you. And what's going to drive that willingness to devote the time and the effort. And I'd bring them ideas and bring them, hey, I read about this. What do you think about that? The more prepared you are to be able to extract as much knowledge out of that person, the more, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And I think if I can't tell you how many times I've had, folks that we were mentoring who show up to a meeting and they're just like, all right, mentor me. Right? It doesn't really work that way, right? People don't have time for that. So I think the more prepared you are to be mentored and the more effort you put into it, the more you get out of it.
Yes, over here as well.
32 years ago, this community went through Hurricane Andrew. This university performed admirably. We set the stage. It was high-tech, high-touch. It was visibility. It was eliminating silo management. All those things happened, some of which you alluded to in your remarks, many of the things that you've practiced. I date back to that event without fear of being contradicted, because I'm one of the few surviving people who was in university administration at the time. The title of today's remarks is The Future of Leadership. So we've talked about things that I experienced 32 years ago that you've gone through more recently, maybe at a stepped up level, but what's going to be different Tell us what's going to be different about leadership in the future from your perspective.
Great question. So listen, some things, in all honesty, don't change, right? And they shouldn't change. Other things, I think the most important thing that's going to be different is this phenomenon of people working remotely and how you lead people that are not all working in the same office space. I think you can't take the old leadership styles and apply it to an environment where people are not face to face, right? Because it's just different. So when everything or a lot of things are happening via, a laptop or an iPad or your phone, you have to be able to adjust your leadership style to the audience. And what we've seen is, the connectivity of employees to organizations has been diluted because the human interaction and the camaraderie and just the day-to-day, so much of what happens in a given day when you're in the office is not planned. It's not on your calendar. It just happens because people are next to each other. And when that no longer exists, how do you try to initiate that level of connectivity when people are not side by side? So what we're trying to do from a leadership standpoint is, number one, we have a hybrid work environment where we've said people need flex time, they want to commute less, great. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're at the office. Tuesday, Thursday, you can work from wherever you need to work. So we've created kind of a balance from that standpoint. Number two, we are trying to do everything we can to teach leaders how to lead in an environment where people are not right next to each other. And it's not easy to do. It's really not easy to do because you have to be much more intentional. It actually requires more time and effort to lead people that are not next to you, because you have to figure out how to engage them, how to get to know them, how to build relationships. And that's not always easy to do when people are not in the same office setting. So it does take more time from a leadership standpoint to lead people who are not in your general vicinity. And like everything else in life, that has to be developed as a leadership. You can't just assume that people that didn't grow up in that environment now know how to do that, because they've never done it before. They weren't led that way, and now we expect them just to know how to do so. So we're trying to be much more intentional in making sure our leadership team knows how to lead people that are not in the office. And how do you retain people that are not in the office? Because people there's less loyalty to organizations because they can easily unplug one computer, plug it into another one, and now they have a new employer. So making sure that you keep those employees with the firm for a long time requires a lot more effort. And I think that's something that is being missed in this remote working environment, that it's really good in some situations because you can be more efficient and you have more time or less time to travel, but it's really bad in some other ways, and we have to figure out a way to mitigate the shortcomings. And I don't think most companies are spending enough time thinking about that because there's a gap there. So I think leadership is becoming more difficult, and we have to do a better job of training leaders to lead in a completely much more digital and a much more remote environment. I think the other thing is data. And what I mean by data is, making sure we know the metrics of what the drivers are to the business. And a lot of times, I'm a big believer that if you don't measure something, it doesn't happen. So we got to make sure we're measuring the things that are really the key catalyst and the drivers to success. So, and we have plenty of data to do so. Sometimes we have too much data, and we just have to be able to fine-tune the data into measuring the things that we know are important, and make sure whoever is being led understands, has a common knowledge and expectation of what it is we're trying to succeed. What else is going to be different from a leadership standpoint going forward? I think agility, we have to be faster. And I think, we used to approach problems with this kind of waterfall decision-making process, where you'd have a project and it'd take you 3 or 4 months. And now you have to run things in parallel. You don't have the benefit of having so much time to say, I have a project timeline that's 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, if it doesn't work, I'll start the new project. I think you have to be ready to fail fast, and you have to be able to run things in parallel, and because 6 months right now is an eternity. You have to move, you have to be agile enough to be able to work on things in parallel, understand that there's a cost, but there's a benefit to being able to get things done in a much more proactive way. And you have to take the frictions out of that process. In other words, you gotta delegate decision making to people, make sure you have the right people in the right jobs, let them make decisions, and keep going. Because if it takes you a year or two to do something that others are doing in 90 days, you're gonna be left behind. So there's a lot of aspects of leadership that I think are the same, because it's still about people, but there's a lot of aspects to leadership that has to deal with the environment and technology that we have. And listen, I think the most important thing we have to do, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, people in leadership jobs today, didn't grow up in this environment, right? So they weren't leaders in an environment of data and digital and remote working environments. So we can't just assume that they know how to do this. We have to train them, we have to develop them, we have to help them. And we're all kind of learning together, because this is all happening, at across the board at a similar pace. So just because somebody's in a leadership job doesn't know they know how to lead in this environment. We have to figure out a way to make them good leaders in the work environment that they're currently operating within. So there's a lot that's happening. It's going to separate those that are successful from those that are not. And a lot of times people talk about the employees of an organization as being good or bad. I always focus on the leadership team, because the players are only as good as the coaches. And if you don't have a good coaching staff, if you don't have a good leadership team, it's going to be very hard for you to have a good employee base, because one is a reflection of the other. And that's kind of my approach. Thank you.
We have one last question over here.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name's Peyton. I'm a Master of Finance student at Miami Herbert. And you talked a lot about teamwork, leadership, what the mentors have meant to you. Can you maybe talk about when you've taken some risk, how you approach risk, and how you deal with humility as well?
So risk-taking is a very important part of business and certainly anybody's individual career. And I'm a big believer in preparation. I think you win and lose by how well prepared you are to take on risk. And anything you can do to minimize the amount of risk you're taking by being well prepared, I think is an advantage. So no matter what kind of risk you're taking, it could be nothing. It could be an interview, it could be a presentation, it can be an investment. The more prepared you are, the more time you put into preparation, I think the more you mitigate risk, and the better return on that risk you're going to have. And it sounds pretty basic, right? It sounds pretty fundamental, but I can't tell you how many folks I run across that when you start, the reason I'm in banking, one of the reasons I'm in banking, is because in my industry as a banker, and there's some people here that can attest to this, it's one of the few jobs where you can sit across from somebody and you can ask them almost anything you want and they're going to give you an answer. Seriously, it's kind of scary. I bet you the IRS or the FBI doesn't have this level of access. I mean, we sit down with business owners and executives from every industry in different size companies, and we ask them about their strategy, their value propositions, their products, how were they successful, how did they fail. It's a never-ending case study, and they always give you an answer. And they usually give you an honest answer. So it's great. When I listen to people, it's a never-ending, journey into people's lives. And people just open up very quickly, and I love that. I love being able to listen and learn from other people's successes and challenges. So when I listen to how people have taken, risk, I always see that the most seasoned executives and business owners and entrepreneurs, it seemed like they were taking a lot of risk, but what people don't really realize is most of them, it was very calculated risk, and it was very well prepared. They were very well prepared to take on that risk, and they had already kind of mapped out, you know, what if this happens, what if that happens, and what if that happens. They didn't have to react in the moment because they had thought through all of the potential alternatives, outcomes that can come as a result of that. So I think preparation is a big, big element of risk management. And even though when people, it may look like you're taking all the risk, but from the outside, but from the inside, if you've done your homework and you really understand the landscape, it may still be risky, but not nearly as risky as for those that don't really know what's going on. And listen, success, I think humility, you know, when it comes to being, you know, if you've experienced success, people want to be with people who are successful. I think success breeds success. It's just the nature of a human. When you have an organization or individuals that are successful, people want to be part of that. But people want to hang out with people that are humble and grounded and don't wear that success on their, you know, on their shoulder. So I think being grounded and being willing to share your successes with others and celebrating kind of low key and helping people be as successful as you are, it's just kind of who, you know, it's just a key, a very positive characteristics that I've always been attracted to. And that's kind of the way I try to make sure my management team is behaving, and certainly the way I'm behaving.
Thank you for the question. George, thank you for joining us. I will just say one special thing. I think George, I've gotten to know you and I've listened to this conversation. I really am inspired by how central you are as a pillar to this community. Like, you've been walking the talk ever since you have been here. And I find a lot of people talk about community and feeling responsibility for it, but you live it day in and day out. And I think the community is a lot stronger because of it. And I personally feel inspired by it, even though you give me shit all the time. But so thank you very much for everything you do for the community, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.